This is Gabriel Custodiet of Watchman Privacy. I know why you're here. You're looking to escape the technocratic apparatuses that you see slowly enveloping you and restraining your freedom. For the fundamentals of privacy, you should start by visiting escapethetechnocracy.com to see my video tutorials, books, and other resources for getting off the surveillance grid. Watchman Privacy and Escape the Technocracy are leading the fight for privacy, and unlike just about any other show, we practice what we preach. Private payment options, no threat modeling, no statist or collectivist solutions, and no sponsors, ever. You know what that means? It means we can speak the unmitigated truth as we see it. Your support alone determines the future of this show. Go support you and me at escapethetechnocracy.com. I'm very pleased to be joined for the 7th time by Jayant Bhandari. Now, Mr. Bhandari has traveled to around 100 countries, lived in many, explored their dark underbellies, and has some insightful thoughts on the state of the world, particularly the Third World. Mr. Jayant Bhandari, welcome back to the show. How are you doing?
I'm very well, Gabriel. Thank you very much for having me again.
It's my pleasure. We both very much enjoy these conversations, I know, as do a lot of the audience. And let me say a couple things up front. First of all, we're going into some pretty dark topics in this, as we tend to do. So probably don't want your kids to be listening to this, adults only. I wanted to start, Jayant, with big picture topic, as I like to do. And I wanted to ask you about something that we've kind of been talking about, which is cultural psychopathy. Now, I'm fascinated by psychopaths, psychopathy, sociopathy, and basically what it is, it's a psychological term, and it means essentially a person without empathy. Somebody who, as a result of not having empathy, not being able to put themselves in someone else's shoes, antisocial as a result, selfish in the negative sense, self-serving, and therefore prone to cruelty, violence, unable to be part of a bigger cause. Now, I understand psychopathy to be a biological condition. That's how I've studied. Basically an absence of chemicals in the brain. And yet there's definitely the case to be made that there is an environmental, cultural component to how we develop empathy. You know, Martha Stout, the sociopath next door, I know we both read this book. She says that East Asia, for example, has far fewer instances of psychopaths by a very large margin compared to the West, because in those societies, they instill this sense of, you're part of the collective, you're part of the whole. When psychopaths get into power, the people around them can kind of dampen their own empathy. So it's a complex thing. It's clearly not just a matter of chemicals in the brain. It's a complex thing. Maybe the biological determinism that I first thought about psychopaths isn't quite right. And I bring this up because the psychopathic tendencies, the lack of empathy, the pure animalistic striving for hedonism, the might makes right, is a characteristic that you describe of the Third World. So maybe we could start this conversation. Could we make the case that the Third World is culturally sociopathic? And how would that look?
Gabriel, it's very interesting. I read through the book of the Sociopath Next Door, written by Martha Stout. And throughout the book, I was thinking, this is exactly how Indians think. And this is how a vast majority, or probably all of Indians think. And I started to think that the low IQ people have a lack of empathy in their minds. They are sadistic if they are exposed to better things in life, because they can't enjoy better things in life. So they want to show off the better things they have access to, rather than feel comfort in access to those things. So at the end of the day, what you see in the Third World is actually psychopathic conduct. But also, what I see among the Third World people is that the higher IQ people, the intelligent people, have a very strong tendency to be exploitative. And the reason they are exploitative, I think, is because there's no reason to develop empathy in a feedback mechanism of a system of the Third World. You can acquire more resources by exploiting the low IQ masses, rather than being productive and contributing to the society. Because the difference between higher IQ people and lower IQ people is so huge that these higher IQ people are motivated, get a feedback signal to be psychopathic in their conduct, rather than empathetic or or to attempt to contribute to the society. So again and again in my life in India, I have seen that the rich people, the successful people, tend to be exploitative, and they tend to be sadistic, because again in an environment like that, they cannot learn to enjoy or be happy or at be peace with their success, because that's not what their mindset is. They can't really enjoy those things. So they only use sadistic pleasure to sort of, in a very convoluted manner, enjoy their gains.
One of your refrains has been that people with high IQs or people from different societies and cultures, they fail to understand other societies and cultures because there is a huge gap. There's a huge gap. And if we attribute that, let's say, to IQ, then if you think about what IQ is giving you, there's more thinking going on. There's more self-reference, which means people are more self-critical. And also a imagination can develop more powerfully. And all these things are the things that would allow you to imagine other scenarios, imagine being in other people's shoes, which is kind of what empathy is. So there's definitely something to be looked into, and I would encourage people to read about psychopathy, if for no other reason than some of these people are walking around even in your society. However, we're going to define this. So it's an interesting conversation that I hope we'll continue to have, Jayant, as we go along in these conversations.
Yeah, Gabriel, just to add there, abstract thinking is not something that low IQ people have capability of. You cannot communicate to them ideas. You have to physically relate those ideas to them before there's any hope of those ideas is sticking in their minds. So, for example, in the past, there used to be public hangings in these countries because, if you give capital punishment to people behind walls, that does not really register in the minds of these people. They need a physical presence of those ideas before there is any hope of those ideas getting registered in their minds. You also see how Indians drive, and for that, you only have to Google driving Indian road or something, and you will come across literally thousands of videos of how Indians drive. And if you see something in which people have a close encounter with a major accident, they get up and get going right away. There's no reflection on what happened. There's no abstract thinking. There's no thought, no real thought of tomorrow. They just move on, and they have no empathy for other people. So when you see an accident happen, it is as if other people did not register anything whatsoever. Those people might be dying in an accident. No one comes to help them. And I fully understand that that might not happen in many countries, even in some rich countries, because of legalities involved. But here, people don't even register those accidents. They just move on. They do not even blink their eyes. They don't even move their head to see what's happening.
When I first read about psychopaths, it was astonishing to realize that, wow, I had been sharing space my entire life with people who looked like me, but had a completely different set of guidelines and things going on in their head. And that is a thing that we would do well to note. And this is something you talk about. This is something we've talked about, that people are different. And we have these inhibitions because of, I would say, primarily religious reasons, where we want to assume that this person and this person are the same. But if you go past the facade, that is clearly not the case. And it's important that people start to recognize that and to study the sorts of things, whether that's IQ, psychopathy, third world culture, that we have discussed.
Yeah. So, Gabriel, in my view, we are all primarily animals. I was having a conversation with some libertarians, and they were talking about the fact that they think that babies are grown with full libertarian feelings. I completely disagree with that. Babies are born with very animalistic instincts. All they care about their own well-being rather than of the well-being of other people. they have no interest in liberty. Their interest is into getting fed. And unless these babies experience civilizational values and civilizational conditioning, they will stay animalistic. And that is what you actually experience when you visit third world countries. They are animalistic societies. Now, what happens with people in the developed world, people in the civilized world, which is I call the West European nations, their associated nations, and Far East Asia, which is Japan, Korea, and increasingly China. What you see is that civilizational values get imparted to these people through the process of their upbringing. In the Western society, this could be Christianity, this could be Ten Commandments, and a kind of shame and guilt get implanted in you. Um, the end result is that these people might start assuming that those civilizational values are a given for human beings. That is actually not true. Those civilizational values appear in us as we grow up in a civilized society. Unfortunately, in the third world, the higher IQ people don't behave well. They are exploitative, and that is where Brahmin gets a bad name for. And that is indeed true. They exploit people in the lower caste. But at the same time, people in the lower caste, when they rise into positions of power, exploit even more. And the problem is that these people never really develop those civilizational values, including guilt, shame, empathy, things that develop very slowly in us.
Let's get to some questions now on India. Obviously, this is a topic that I love to pick Mr. Bhandari's brain on. And here's a topic we have not discussed so far for no other reason than I just haven't brought it up. From afar, some might think that India must have excellent, rigorous schooling for kids. What is the reality of school for kids in India?
So I went to the top school in Bhopal, which is in central India. It is a city of 2 million people. And I would say about a third of teachers there openly asked for bribes from students. You cannot stop corruption in that country. Whenever I have had employees working under me, I always automatically assumed that they would be stealing an X amount of money, and there was nothing I was going to be able to do about it. Uh, if I increased their salaries, that only meant that the corruption actually increased rather than decreased. And you saw that I saw that experience over my many years living and working in India. Indian bureaucrats started getting fabulously well paid, but at the same time, their $1 or $2 or $5 bribes increased to thousands and literally tens of thousands of dollars of bribes. So that is the ecosystem you're talking about. The schooling system is mostly about we are telling you what to think, we are telling you what to do, and don't follow what we are doing, do what we are telling you. So people become extremely hypocritical as they grow up. And the schooling system completely discourages critical thinking. And again, I'm talking about a Christian missionary school that I went to, which was by far the best school in central India. And the some of the people in that school actually believed in moral values. They wanted to impart moral values to us. And at least one of them was from the Western Hemisphere. So they wanted to do it, but they also knew that there was limited control they had over teachers and even on students, because these students come from families whose interest was only to get a certificate. They don't really understand the value of education. The for them, education is only about getting jobs or getting a certificate so that they could get into the government somehow or somehow into higher positions in companies. Their interest to do with education has nothing to do with elevating your own minds, becoming a civilized person, becoming a better person, and develop critical thinking. Critical thinking is seriously discouraged in that country. If I asked my teacher a question, let's say a question in physics or chemistry, it was not unlikely that he would come and slap you right away, because he would see that as a challenge to his authority. And this continues, this reverberates throughout the society. Although I won't say that schooling is the reason why this happens. This is actually, everything is part and parcel of the same system. You don't ask questions in that country. If the Prime Minister of India gives a speech somewhere, he never ever takes a question from anyone. And that is exactly what you see throughout the society. Seniors, elders do not like to respond to anything because they see that as a challenge to authority. And moreover, Gabriel, this also means that they actually don't know what they are talking about. They are simply regurgitating what they think they should be saying, rather than in terms of principles, understand what they are talking about. So this country has no underpinnings, no substrata, no foundations of principle based thinking, of reasoning to what they want to achieve, or of a moral fabric through which you decide on what is right and wrong. So, unfortunately, this is how the schooling system works, this is how the society and the institutions work.
Starting in our last episode, I wanted to use your expertise as a way to understand a little bit more about the various regions of India. It is a country of great cultural diversity. Last time we spoke about Manipur, and I thought we could go to the opposite side of the country and talk about Gujarat. What's the deal with this region of India?
I have historically been reasonably happy with people of Gujarat. Gujarat produces some of the best businessmen of India. And my view, Gabriel, and this is a very strange way of looking at life, is that the people in power, people in businesses, are extremely exploitative in that country. They are horrible people mostly, and so horrible that if that they are the only people you encounter in life, you are very likely to become a leftist if you have even the slightest of empathy in you. And that is why I'm very sympathetic towards the leftist people in India, despite that I'm a capitalist and I'm a libertarian. Um, Gujarat produces some very good businessmen. Now, these businessmen are, of course, not people who think in terms of providing value to the society, or in terms of creating good productive businesses. They think 100% in terms of transferring money from your pocket to their pocket. Now, value might get created as a byproduct of that uh, uh, way of working, but they create businesses, and they are very exploitative. I come from a community that is supposed to be very exploitative, and I see it all the time. They exploit poor people, they exploit, they land grab, they do all kinds of nasty things in life. However, what happens is that when we only look at these people, we say, hey, these businessmen from Gujarat are so corrupt and exploitative, without realizing that the rest of the people are sheepish. And honestly, Gabriel, if you gave me only two options, either to be an oppressor or be oppressed, I will choose to be an oppressor, because I think spiritually it's a higher status, it's a higher strata of mindset to be an oppressor rather than to be a sheepish oppressed. So the vast majority of people are extremely sheepish. You can do pretty much anything to them, and they have no righteous indignation emerging within them. I actually used to tell them, why don't you do something about what you are facing? And they will not do anything, and they will sell their souls for pennies. So now, when these people are by chance or by legal edicts elevated to higher positions, they become even more exploitative. And from that perspective, when I see things, I say, hey, Brahmins are perfectly fine where they are, because without them, India would fall into Sudan or Ethiopia almost right away. That is how bad the masses of that country, how degraded that the masses of that country are. So yes, businessmen of that country are extremely exploitative, extremely corrupt, and it is impossible to operate in that country without being those. But that does not mean you should look down at them, because you should look at them within the ecosystem that they are operating in, which is extremely sheepish, extremely irrational, extremely immoral.
Is it still a bit of a powder keg after the 2002 Gujarat riots?
Well, it is becoming more and more of a power keg, Gabriel. Modi has increased Hindu fanaticism very rapidly in that country. He is literally running a Hindu nation now, despite the fact that the constitution makes India a secular country. Now, that does mean that a Muslim minority, which is about close to, I think, now 250 million people, it's the second largest Muslim population in the world, they feel isolated from the mainstream of the society. And if they wanted to rent a house or an apartment, a Hindu isn't going to give it to them. If they came to me, I'm not going to give it to them either, because the police will come over and would want to ask me so many questions. And if anything ever went wrong, the police would take me to the prison. So the isolation of minorities is very bad in that country. This Hindutva, this Hindu fanaticism has also given rationalization to many separatist movements in that country. For example, the Khalistan movement, which is a very brain dead movement in my view, but that is still another side of the same coin. They are the same people, similar irrationality, similar immorality. These people are now creating ruckus in the Western world as well. So the religious divisions, divide and rule, is increasing in that country. But also Modi has to do that because he has no vision to improve the country. And literally hundreds of millions of people in that country are unemployed, and he has to distract those people. So, building new temples or building massive statues, not just in India, but also in the US and in Canada, gives him validity in the eyes of a lot of Hindus who think that Modi is securing Hinduism as a society, Hindus as a society, against Muslims. Now, I don't think Muslims and Sikhs are innocent in any way or form. If they were in majority, they would have done exactly the same. And in fact, we have a proof of that, because that's what they are doing in Bangladesh currently, and that's what they did in Pakistan, by being Muslim majority and going against minorities in those countries. So, this is the state of mind of all these people. They think they are all very different people: Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, they are very different people. Actually, they are not. They are all parts of the different sides of the same coin. So India is becoming increasingly a power keg. And what you need to remember is that there are two kind of institutions possible in that society. Either you have a Taliban kind of setup, which is what I think India is migrating towards. That is an inevitable consequence of a predatory, hollowed out institutional system that India has currently, or having institutions like the ones India has today, but then those institutions should be run by relatively intelligent, relatively morally conscious people, the kinds that India had before, during the British times. So either the British or people as intelligent and as morally conscious. And I'm not saying they were saints. All I'm saying is they should be more morally conscious than what the current regime is, should come to power, or India will fall apart into a Taliban system, which means that India is, within your and my lifetime, devolve into a Taliban kind of system, and it will be an improvement on what the current system is like.
Speaking of Gujarat, it is estimated that at least 250 girls and women were gang raped and then burned to death. Children were force fed petrol and then set on fire. Pregnant women were gutted and then had their unborn children bodies shown to them. Children were killed by being burnt alive, and those who dug the mass graves described the bodies interred within them as burned and butchered beyond recognition. Children and infants were speared and held aloft before being thrown into fires. So that's some of the stuff that happened in Gujarat.
I think you're talking about an event that happened under the rule of the current Prime Minister Narendra Modi when he was the Chief Minister of Gujarat. This was butchering of Muslim minorities during his reign. Some of the men who raped and cut the bellies of these pregnant women open and took out the embryos hardly spent much time in the prison. And when they came out of the prison a couple of years back, they were celebrated by the police and the society. So, again, that gives you a good feeling of how degraded the culture is. But again, it is always wise to remember that while Muslims were victims here, they are no better. They could actually be worse in most cases. They are just in a minority shape here, so they are victims. In Pakistan, the situation reverses, where the minorities again are victim exactly the same way.
One of your themes is that the third world displays irrationality. And you have explained that this behavior is not necessarily cured by high levels of education or things of this sort. I wonder if you could tell a couple of stories or a story about some of the irrationality you have seen in people who are in high positions in India, let's say politicians or scientists or people who work for the NASA equivalent in India. Do you still see irrational things happening among these people?
So the way you framed question, you assumed that education should have at least in a very slight bit improved their minds. They would have become less irrational. And I tell you the reality, Gabriel, and this is my experience, and this goes against the thinking of the conventional wisdom and the international institutions. These people think that education and prosperity improves the society. They think that education by itself is an improvement and elevates the minds of these people. That does not happen. It actually leads to more perversion than these people used to have before they got so called educated. Prosperity has led to a rapid decline in cultural values of these societies. These societies were much better off staying at the edge of hunger. My grandmom used to tell me this thing, and I used to find it very disturbing when he said that to me when I was a child, because I was still going up, studying in a Catholic school, and my moral teachings were different. Now, these were, of course, just words. These were not really moral teachings, but I was one of those rare people who was absorbing something out of those teachings. My grandmom used to say that there are people in the world who should be let alone to be at the edge of starvation, because if you don't, they will cause trouble. And what you see, Gabriel, is that as some of these third world countries became wealthier because of the free gift of Western technology, they became more pervert. They got more degraded. You can almost see a causality between increasing wealth and increasing education and destruction of cultural values and disintegration of the institutions in, let's say, India and Pakistan, in a lot of sub-Saharan African countries, and primarily in the Middle East. They were not deserving of the easy money that people in many of the Middle Eastern countries were getting. Now, don't get me wrong, I actually like some of the Middle Eastern countries, but Middle East has been in chaos for the last 50, 60 years because of wealth and education. Women became more free-minded in the sense that again, within the framework of the ecology of these people, they want all the rights, but they have no understanding of duties. So they want democracy, they want freedom of women to move around, but they don't want to contribute to becoming self responsible. And that leads to perversion. Now, let's get to the crux of the question that you asked me, which is what happens to people who become educated. Gabriel, I went to one of the top engineering colleges in India. And these were the people who, I tell you, I was always amazed. Some of my fellow students were used to do solve differential equations in minutes. They were so quick at those things. And sometimes I would sit down with them to try to understand what those equations represented. And they had zero abstract understanding of those equations. Uh, and towards the end of the semester, when examinations were supposed to get started, these students started going to all the crazy cults to get benefits from those cults. And I used to talk with them and I used to tell them that, hey, how does it work that how would you get better marks in your examination? How would you get a US visa by visiting these deities or temples or different cults, or bringing in those talisman with them? And they found that as a silly question. Really, modern education sat on their minds without changing the substrata of operating system of the mind, which is it did not bring in reason and moral values in the substrata, which also meant that while these people would be very good at copying and pasting and doing being nice shiny cog at best, they would never ever be creative. And you can actually see that among the top administrators that the US has imported from India. Over as a, on average, they are not creative people, they are copy and paste people mostly, and they cannot really create anything new. So despite that these people run some of the top companies in the US, they are not the people who create new enterprises. They have no scientific discovery or technological invention behind them. There's no Indian app that you might have even heard of. Now, this permeates throughout the society. There's no vision among these people because vision comes from creativity, and you have to have this glue, the substrata of reason and morality in you to have a vision and creative thinking. So now these people copied and pasted the American space technology. Now, these people would never ever have conceptualized rising 10 meters above the ground had they not seen Western people doing it. So, everything that India has done in terms of high technology, the nuclear bomb to the space technology, is a simple copy and paste of what happens in the Western society. And in fact, I guarantee you, Gabriel, that even the screws that go into those rockets have very likely been imported from the West. And the reason is that the metallurgical requirements for everything that goes into those rockets is so high that India is incapable of producing any of those things. Certainly, everything high technology in those satellites come from the West. So all that India does is assemble things which is pretty much off the internet technology. As long as you have money, you can assemble rockets and satellites and send them to the south pole of the moon. And even then, India manages to crash those devices. But before the event actually happens, these people go to the temple to get wishes of the deity. Now, really, Gabriel, if I were in their shoes, I would be getting sleepless nights. I would be checking and rechecking and then rechecking every single line of the code, making sure everything worked together, everything simulated together. I would have no time to eat, no time to drink, no time to have a small talk, no time to pray, and no time to visit a temple. Not that I am necessarily against visiting a temple. All I'm saying is that this shows that these people have no vision, They copy and pasted technology, and they need the blessings of God. And again, I'm not against God as long as spirituality is concerned, but their relationship with God is materialistic. All relationships in India to do with God is materialistic. That's true with Islam, that's true with Hinduism, that's true with Sikhism. They don't visit the temple for spiritual growth. There's no silence in these places. They go there for either because they want to build community, because they are so atomized and so afraid of everything, or to get material benefits from the deity, including in Islam. That's how corrupt the whole society is. And that's what happens in the space agencies as well. And you see it throughout the society, um, superstitions permeating through who you might consider to be among the elite in that society.
We brought this up in a previous discussion, slavery in India. Now, worldwide, there are estimated to be around 40 million slaves, which is, by the way, apparently more than any time in human history, and it seems to be growing. Now, India contributes to this by they contribute about 20% of the world's slaves. So I think that's just including India proper. I don't think that necessarily includes, Bangladesh, et cetera. And so don't say that India doesn't contribute to the world, first of all. I wonder if you could talk about slavery in India and just anything interesting that stands out to you about Indian slavery.
Again, the way we define slavery obscures the topic completely. Uh, every Indian is a slave. Every of those 1.45 billion people is a slave. You talk with any Indian working in a company, he has no freedom. He has to keep his cell phone on 24 hours a day. He is called to the office during the weekends. His boss calls him up at 2 o'clock in the night and he has to pick up the phone. And that is uniformly true in that country. There's hardly an exception you ever see in that country. So people are slaves in that country, and they are slaves in that country because they have no moral indignation in their minds. They never ever challenge authority or fight back. Civilization cannot be built unless you are prepared to fight for values, and before that you have to have some values. So unless you have those things, and India does not have values, they have no instinct to fight back, which means that everyone in that country is a slave. And the higher you go, the more powerful you become, the more of a slave you are, because you are now trying to do this dance and drama to keep your chair, which means that you are a slave of people working under you, because you need to get bribes from them. They know what you are up to. So, this is a slavish society where everyone is a slave. But at the same time, in formal terms, the way the United Nations or the World Bank calculates slaves, India does have slaves. If you go to smaller places, you can actually identify those. I have seen those slaves in life. Moreover, women get trafficked. This is a regularity in that country. Millions of women have been trafficked and raped, and no one will do anything about it. Are they slaves? Of course, they are slaves. They can't leave their rooms. They are bound to that rooms throughout their lives until their life where they could no longer be prostituted. And they are brought in as children, raped, gang raped, and kept as prostitutes. Millions of women live that way. They are slaves. What does Indian government do about this? Absolutely nothing. Until the time the American whip comes out, and until the time America says, "Hey, India, this is too much. Stop this trafficking of people. Stop this slave trade. Stop these slaves." So India suppresses. India tries to control those things, but that only usually means that those things go underground and reappear in more pervert ways. So America can do only so much, but at the same time, the whole society is slavish, and formal slaves are easy to see in that country. They are called bonded laborers.
What is your take on Gandhi?
I think the British colonizers realized that there was this really stupid guy who they could use for their purposes without actually having to formally appoint him as their agent. Uh, Gandhi, were he a saint, would never have been recognized in India. Every single good Indian who ever came out of India was first recognized by Western people, not by Indians. Indians have no eyes for spirituality, they have no eyes for values. They will actually kill you if they saw anything good in you. So, good people are at a serious risk because these people are trying to wake these Indians up, and these people want to be asleep. So Gandhi was just one of those people who was power hungry in a different way. He wanted to become a saint. He wanted to be seen as a prophet, as a saint. And if I put myself in the shoes of Gandhi, if I go back 100 years, I would realize that I would want the British to stay back in India to improve the culture and the society of that country, where children were getting married, babies were getting married. Uh, uh, you could do all kinds of atrocities on people across the board. Women were getting burnt on the funeral pyre of their husbands. Thuggy as a cult was very common in that country. British were trying to control it. So Gandhi, in the were he right thinking, would have actually worked with the British to correct those social issues, as some of Indians actually did. There was a person called Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Now he lived much before Gandhi was born, but he was the person who was a catalyst behind ending the burning of widows in the funeral pyre of their husbands. Now the sati pratha, this is called sati pratha, continues even today in isolated locations. But he wanted to control it. Similarly, Rabindranath Tagore, who was a contemporary of Gandhi, was was an Indian Nobel laureate. He wanted to work with the British and improve the society. Gandhi was more politically minded, and he was also very racist when it comes to blacks. He lived in South Africa, and he wanted liberty wanted to fight for Indians, not for blacks. But it seems that again he wanted to be a saint of Indians in South Africa rather than be a person who wanted to change the thinking and mindsets of these people.
Listener discretion advised for the upcoming topic. I came across, Giant, a proverb, an Indian proverb that says, "For a girl to be a virgin at 10 years old, she must have neither brothers, nor cousins, nor father." What do you make of that saying?
Well, I never heard of that proverb, Gabriel, but if you are pointing fingers at incest or sodomy, that is not uncommon at all in that country. Now, statistically, India has no incest and no sodomy, but that's mostly because you can't really go to the police station and report those cases. The society, if a girl gets raped by her father, um, what escape does he have if she goes to an orphanage or if she goes to the street because she wants to leave report against her father? She will still be raped on the streets. The police will rape her anyway, so she has no escape. So she will just endure being raped by her dad or by her brother. And the family, the mother, the sisters will actually side with the brothers and dad because they don't want a bad name. And they don't want a bad name, not just in the society, not because they have a sense of honor, but there's an ego associated with these things. So incest happens, sodomy of boys happen. If sodomy of boys happen, everyone will laugh at you. If that boy complained about it, police will of course not register the case, but if absolutely everyone will laugh at that boy. and he will want to avoid becoming a laughing stock. So you have no statistics on this, but if you looked around in that country, you do see children being abused all the time, at least physically. Now, what happens indoors, I'm not sure about, but I do keep hearing from women and boys about having been sodomized and girls having been raped by their family members.
How bad is malnutrition in India?
Well, a simple number is 1 out of 2 Indians is stunted because they simply don't get enough nutrition. But I would say 100% of Indians are malnutritioned because there's virtually no protein in that diet. Indian diet is primarily carbohydrates, oil, and sugar, irrespective of how rich or poor they are. In fact, I would rather be a poor person in India in terms of diet than a rich person, because rich people consume far too much of carbohydrates, oil, and sugar because they can afford those things. So, diet is really bad in that country. But by the World Health Organization's statistics, I think 40 to 44% of Indians are stunted. Now, India claims that only about 20 or 30, I can't remember exactly, percent of people are go to sleep hungry. But the real number is far higher. And Indian government's measure of whether you are eating enough or not is in terms of calories. So you could be eating rotten potatoes and rice, and as long as you are eating enough calories, for them, you are well fed. So again, this is a very convoluted measure of whether you are getting enough nutrition or not. But it's a even if you don't account for that, 50% of Indian children are stunted.
One more question about India. You have said previously that there's really no running water across India. So maybe you could also paint a picture of what does a country like that look like without running water?
Yes, I know that many people who go to five-star hotels or even three-star hotels, for which they pay maybe anything between $50 a day to $200 a day, think that there is always water in the tap. However, $50 a day is as much as 80% of Indians probably earn in a month. So they really don't experience the real life. These visitors who spend $50 a day, they don't really experience the real life of an average Indian. Even in the most elite parts of that country, you get water for about an hour to 2 hours at most, even during the good seasons, which means even during the rainy seasons. That's the limit of water you will ever get in even the best parts of that country. Virtually everyone who has the means has an overhead tank in his house in which he pumps water and stores water for the daily usages. And that is how the $50 hotels provide you water throughout the day. Now, even then, most of those hotels will actually get private companies to supply them water in tankers. And the rich people also put in sucking pumps into the main water line to pump out water faster so that they could store as much water in their overhead tanks as possible over that 1 hour period. And then they use private companies to supply them water once in a while to replenish another water tank that they might have underground. So every morning, even of relatively well off families, is spent thinking about budgeting for water. When I was a child, I used to wake up at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the morning, go to the roadside, set up my bucket and a water pump to pump water into a tank, which then was pumped to an overhead tank later, and we would still run out of water eventually during the day. So that's the situation of water is for relatively rich and elite people. Now imagine the situation of people in villages. They simply don't have water coming even for an hour. They walk to the river or canal, which is actually quite a slushy, quite a viscous water, which means that it's not just muddy, it is filled with chemicals and all kinds of pollutants. And that's the water these people have access to. They drink that water, they bathe in that water, if at all they bathe, and they spend hours every morning bringing buckets of waters in on over on their head back to their houses. Now, your next question should be, rather than sympathizing with these people, your next question should be, why is plumbing not available in India 2000 years after it was already in the Western society? In Rome, in Roman places, you can see remnants of water supplies. So the answer is that these people cannot organize. An organization of 2% in that country has 1% too many. They have no planning for the future. So local people, if I were them, I would try to get them to work together and collect a few dollars every person to set up plumbing, and that would be for almost forever. But they never ever managed to do that. And if I tried something like that, some goon will come and want to get rid of me. So that's how bad the situation is. But as far as water supply is concerned, it's extremely polluted everywhere. For the elite, it might be available an hour or two every day. For the poor people, they really have no access to running water.
I want to get your quick take on a current or a recent event. So, Jayant Bhandari responding to the news cycle. This is from Lacey, Washington, which is kind of getting close to Tacoma, Washington. Washington, historically a really great civilized state. A father accused of almost strangling his daughter in an attempted honor killing outside her school was allowed to walk free for 12 days after blah, blah, blah. Isan Ali, 44, and his wife, Zara Subi Mohsin Ali, were charged with attempted kidnapping and assault after the attack. The girl, 17, who wasn't named, ran away from home to her high school after her parents tried to put her on a plane to Iraq. Her father had recently been threatening her with honor killing for refusing an arranged marriage with an older man in another country, the girl told police. So a attempted honor killing outside a school where the girl's father tried to strangle her to death. Your reaction to that event, Jayant?
This is not uncommon at all. The third world parents really think they own their children. And, this is a result of the common IQs of these people. The question also is, are those children even capable of thinking for themselves and deciding for themselves? My preference would have been to let these people grow up and live in the places that they come from. They belong to Iraq and the other third world countries. They don't belong to the Western society because their cultural mindset, their what you mentioned as cultural psychopathy, is very different. They don't belong to the Western society. They never change. In fact, they become worse with time. Again, a perversion that happens, which is that they get into a serious identity crisis. They don't fit into the West, and they are no longer where they belong to. And that creates more problems than than what they would have had in their homeland. Unfortunately, what you said is nothing uncommon. That's forced arranged marriages in the third world, particularly in the Middle East and in South Asia, is very common. And the merger of that way of thinking with the Western way of thinking does not work either. It creates all kinds of perversions as well.
Moving on to more general topics of the third world, one of the things that stands out most prominently to me in my memory as a kid growing up in the third world was the willful cruelty to animals. And I guess we remember these sorts of things where they stand out because animals are innocent. And, we're talking about people purposefully swerving their vehicles to run over dogs, for example. We're told that the third world is more in tune with nature, but, what are your thoughts on the matter and how these people treat animals?
So, the French philosopher Rousseau came up with this term called noble savages, and that has corrupted the thinking and perception of urban people. Urban people have a tendency to think that people in rural and tribal areas are just noble people, and they live in harmony with nature. But Gabriel, that isn't true anywhere in the world. Even if you go to rural places in the Western society, you see a backward way of thinking, you see bad diet, and you see a very petty-minded behavior. And that is also extremely true with the third world countries. These are societies that are not noble savages, they are savages. As when it comes to animals, they are openly sadistic. They do kill animals, and at the same time, they are virtue signalers who want to feed the stray dogs in countries like India. None of those things work. People are not empathetic, they have no love for animals. If at all, the educated middle class of India has dogs, that is more to show off rather than because they want company. Um, but that is also a reflection of how lacking in empathy they are for other human beings. So if you can't be empathetic towards animals, you actually have no love in your life. You don't love your parents, you don't love your children, you don't love your spouses. Every relationship is a transaction in that country. And that is why the people who are the biggest enemies you have in these countries is not a foreigner or not a person who is distant from you, but your own family and your friends. And that is why these people are extremely atomized. And that is why I think even Prime Minister Modi cannot get a good sleep at night, because he knows that everyone around him is eyeing for his seat. But that is how absolutely everything in that country works.
Topic about jails, prisons in the third world. What brought this up is I was reading something about a Congo jailbreak, and just a couple things from there. At least 129 are killed in this jailbreak in the Congo. Some cases of women being raped. Outdoor temperatures had neared 90 degrees. I guess that's Fahrenheit. The inmates had been without running water or electricity to power fans for more than a day and a half. So it just got me thinking, like, what are jails like in the third world? Because this is an interesting, part of society. I'm curious how they operate.
These are disgusting places, Gabriel, and you can just walk into any police station randomly anywhere in India to experience what these prisons are like. Really have no toilets, no running water. There's you stay hungry. Your relatives have to bring in food for you. You are brutalized in these places. There's no rule of law. The policemen and the prison officers have pretty much every right to do whatever they want to do to you. You might be in those places for years before the court will ever see you. Uh, there are actually cases of many people who are in prison awaiting a trial. In fact, if I'm not wrong, a vast majority, not just majority, but a vast majority of people in Indian prisons are awaiting trial. They are not accused people, but the court will not give them a date and will not let them go free until the time their trial is over. So that is the situation of the country. You get clogged into with a lot of other people in a prison. You are abused by other inmates, and there is simply no recourse to anything in those societies. And I have seen those prisons and jails, and I tell you, they are obnoxious. They are abuse chambers, and police regularly sodomizes and rapes people in those prisons.
Reading from your excellent Twitter profile, Jayant Bhandari 5, we'll certainly have links to this. You're posting a story, I guess going back to Gujarat, but there was a 6-year-old handling explosives. How common are things like that, and how common are things like this in India and just generally in the third world?
I used to sell electronic equipment, industrial equipment when I worked in India. And I went to factories and in construction operations of some of the wealthiest people in India. And you would see in Gujarat, and I have seen those children as small as 5 or 6 working in those factories. That is nothing uncommon. Now, of course, over the last 1 or 2 decades, because of increased visibility, these things have gone underground. Uh, but there is absolutely nothing uncommon about children being used for labor that is inappropriate for them. Now, in my view, Gabriel, getting children to work is an exceptionally important thing. I am a product of my dad's making me work in his operations, in his printing press, where he wanted me to do proofreading, do accounting, to do some maintenance work. I think those were extremely educational for me. But there are things that are fit for children and things that are not fit for children. But children in India do all kinds of things and even unsafe things. Now, in my province, there was a firecracker factory not very far from where I grew up. And everyone knew about it. A couple of hundred people died last year. Now, no one will even remember that. Not even Indians will remember that because these occurrences are so common. So that fire factory caught fire and 100 or 200 people died. No one was punished. The chief commissioner of that place was sent to a bit of an obscure position. For now, he will return back to his normal bribe collection eventually. But there's nothing uncommon about using children for nasty work.
Reading a headline here: 184 killed in Haiti, the UN says, as gang leader allegedly orders massacre of elderly on voodoo priest's advice. Have you ever been to Haiti?
No, I haven't been to Haiti.
How about just a few rapid fire questions to get you out of here, Jayant? Are burqas imposed more by women or men?
More by women.
How long would it take China to conquer India if they fought today?
2 days.
Which of these are second world countries, if any? Indonesia, Brazil, Mongolia?
I think all of them. But they will never become first world countries.
How long do you think it took Prime Minister Narendra Modi to earn his PhD?
0 days. He did not do a PhD. He did post-graduation with a title, The Entire Political Science. No university anywhere in the world, including in India, teaches that course, but somehow he got that degree.
What is the most crazy thing you've heard become solved with a bribe?
Absolutely everything.
Finish this sentence. The Indian passport is so weak that...
It's completely useless. Every immigration officer stops you for interrogation. Getting a visa requires you to face humiliation from Western embassies in New Delhi.
I heard you also tweet recently that even Ghana gives you issues with your Indian passport.
Absolutely. I used to travel with my colleagues around the world, and I would usually be the last. I was always the last person to come out of immigration because I would be interrogated. Thankfully, I no longer have an Indian passport.
Well, very grateful, as always, to hear from Mr. Jayant Bhandari. Please let me know if you'd like these conversations to continue. There's the possibility of maybe having, splintering off a particular show just to have more of these discussions. So please let us know. In the meantime, I hope you'll check out Jayant Bhandari's website, jayantbhandari.com. Follow him on Twitter. Otherwise, thank you, Jayant. Your final words.
Well, thanks very much, Gabriel. Just a final thing is that I run a yearly philosophy seminar in Vancouver. The next one is on the 23rd of August this year in downtown Vancouver. And you can see the draft program of that day on my website, which is jayantbhandari.com.
Hey, thanks for listening. Look, I could use your help real quick. If you could share this, engage with me in some way, leave a review anywhere. This really helps me to break the technocratic shadow banning that is happening with my brand. And of course, if you really want to escape the technocracy, go to escapethetechnocracy.com. Privacy tutorial series, books, consulting, and of course, you can leave a donation. Thank you very much.